Hello, this is John Tayer, and I welcome you to another edition of Chamber Chat, which is our opportunity at the Boulder Chamber to talk with you, our business leaders, about everything that we're doing to address your needs during this very difficult and challenging COVID-19 period. Now, before I introduce our special guest today, Congressman Joe Neguse, I did want to chat with you about a couple things that are coming up in the coming week that are going to be important for you to pay attention to. So we've been very focused at the Boulder Chamber on beginning the recovery effort and making sure our businesses understand what they need to do to prepare to open and to open responsibly in a way that's protective of public health, but allows you to operate your business and get our economy running. So we've already had a series of what we call feedback sessions with Boulder County Public Health, where our businesses were able to give industry-specific feedback to them on their different regulations for opening. But now we're getting ready to issue those regulations, or they are, and we want to make sure you know what they are. So next Tuesday, May 5, we are going to have a series of industry-centered sessions with Boulder County Public Health, where you're going to get the specific details on what the operating protocols are. We will also have available for you a checklist of all the steps you can take to make sure you're complying with those regulations and other guidance. We also will make sure to have posters for you to put up around your workplace to be clear that you are complying with the regulations and to alert your customers to what they can do to support our efforts to make sure that you can operate your business safely and in a way that protects public health. And then finally, I just want to say about that we will make sure to have everything in Spanish. We're going to be setting up separate Spanish language trainings, and also all the posters will be online at the Boulder Chamber website, boulderchamber.com/COVID-19 in English and Spanish. So remember, May 5, next Tuesday, those are very important education sessions for all of you. The last thing I'm just going to say is that we do care about making sure that our businesses get funding to cover the gap in federal support that they're getting right now. So we've set up the Small Business Relief Fund. We're getting ready to issue those awards for those grants, but we also could use additional support. So go to the Boulder Chamber website and consider what you can give to help support our small businesses and their recovery efforts. So those are the big things coming forward, but I want to also have a good deal of time to talk with our special guest, Joe Neguse. I will tell you that he tells me every time I say Congressman, he says, call me Joe. So I'm going to call him Joe. But you know him as our congressman and the representative to Washington, D.C. for the 2nd Congressional District, where he was elected in 2018 to represent us. And he has been doing an outstanding job. He is a great leader in Congress on so many issues. But I know that right now he's very focused, almost singularly, on making sure that these relief efforts at the federal level are coming down to our district. So I have a couple of questions I just thought I'd ask Joe to maybe try to touch on in his comments with us. First of all, what was the package of relief that was passed last week, and what can we expect from that for our district? I'm wondering what is coming forward in upcoming relief packages. What might we expect to see come forward that's going to support our businesses and our community? And then finally, I'm very interested to know, Joe, what is your vision for the recovery for our community and for our economy? So I hand it off to you, Joe. Welcome to Chamber Chat.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be with you and to see you, and thank you for inviting me to Chamber Chat. And hello to all of your members and to all of the viewers who are watching. As was mentioned, my name is Joe Neguse, and I have the pleasure of and the privilege, really, of representing the 2nd Congressional District, including, of course, wonderful Boulder County, where my wife and I and our daughter live. It has been a very trying 8 weeks for our community, for our state, and for our country. And I have been working with my colleagues in Congress, as John mentioned, to do everything that I can and that we collectively can to ensure that federal resources are brought to bear and ultimately distributed here to our state, because we know that working families and businesses, small businesses across Boulder County, not the city of Boulder and here in Lafayette where we live, and everywhere in between, are hurting a great deal. The good news is we've actually passed a series of really big pieces of legislation over the course of the last 5 weeks, and every one of those bills has been bipartisan, as you can imagine. And I know you know this, John. The political environment in Washington can be pretty toxic and vitriolic. But the truth of the matter is, over the last 5 weeks, I think folks have kind of put aside, for the most part, their partisan differences and instead have focused on what's best for the country. And so I've been proud to be a part of the leadership team in terms of helping get those 4 bills across the finish line. As you know, there was a bill back in March around plussing up our healthcare infrastructure to fund vaccine and CDC research therapeutics for COVID-19. There was a Families First bill that we passed shortly thereafter. There was the big CARES Act package, a $2 trillion bill, which I know many of your members are certainly well aware of, that we passed to try to provide emergency relief to families. It's the bill that created the Payroll Protection Program, otherwise known as PPP, which I know so many of your members are hoping to access, and some have accessed. And then, of course, the most recent emergency bill that we passed just last week. I traveled back to Washington to work on the last bill and to vote on that bill. And the bill did a couple of different things. So first, it plussed up funding for the PPP program. We know that program has obviously been a program where there's been high demand. The first $350 billion, that first tranche of funding, really went out of the door in the first 14 days in terms of those loans, which really function as grants. They're forgivable loans provided businesses meet certain statutory conditions. In 14 days, the Small Business Administration processed, even these loans are ultimately through 7A lenders, but nonetheless, the SBA in its management role processed more loans than it had in the last 14 years. So it gives us all a sense as to the skyrocketing demand for federal relief and the need really in our communities so that small businesses can weather this storm. So we added $250 billion to the PPP program in the bill that we passed last week. We also added $60 billion to the EIDL, the Emergency Disaster Loan Program, grant program, which I know is really crucial to a lot of businesses because, again, it's a grant program, not loans, or at least the first $10,000, right? And gives small businesses the ability to really, again, weather the storm under very trying circumstances. So our hope is that $310 billion will flow to Colorado and to businesses here in our state. We know from recent data that was published by the SBA that on a pro rata basis, Colorado has actually received more than its share based on population of these SBA programs than many other states. So, which is good news. It means that, we're the efforts of so many in our state and the governor's office, the delegation, business leaders like John and so many others, the advocacy that we're doing for our small mom and pop restaurants and retail stores in Boulder is working. But there's still a lot more to do. And we know, based on some of the stories that I know you read about, and John, and that I know many others have, about some of the abuses in the PPP program in that first tranche of funding. Our hope is that the set aside that we enacted last week, so of the $310 billion, $30 billion of it set aside for CFDIs, for community financial development institutions, for minority depository institutions, for credit unions, that the hope is that the dollars will in fact flow to small businesses, which is really consistent with congressional intent, and not to incredibly large publicly traded companies that don't necessarily have that same need. So our hope is that will happen, but we know that folks are frustrated, and I suspect there are many of your members and viewers who have been trying to access some of these programs and have run into a brick wall as the SBA faces a myriad of challenges in scaling up the programs. I would encourage them to reach out to our office. Jill Grano, who's our Director of Community Affairs, is on the phone every day with constituents and small business owners, trying to help them troubleshoot as they're navigating the federal bureaucracy. You can go online at neguse.house.gov and find out more about ways to contact her and other individuals in our office to the extent that you do need that type of assistance. As you mentioned, John, this last bill is not the last bill. It is one of the first, right? I think it's important for all of us in Congress to recognize that while that was an important step, it's not the last step. I anticipate that we will take an even bigger step, and certainly that's my hope in the coming weeks as we work on what's being called CARES 2.0. That bill will hopefully rectify a lot of the gaps that were created in CARES 1.0. To me, that means providing additional emergency relief to American working families, to another form of stimulus in emergency checks that we believe should go out to Americans. It means also improving the gains that we made in unemployment insurance, which were historic in the last bill. And it means really making sure that small businesses are protected and have the resources that they need, again, to weather this crisis. So my hope is that we will, again, plus up PPP funding, because I anticipate that the $250 billion will also be depleted, that Treasury obviously is working on right now. I also think it's important that we fix some of the flaws in the PPP program. We've heard from a lot of business owners in our district, from restaurant owners, again, folks who have owned their businesses for decades, right? They're classic institutions in Boulder that we've all, go to eat at their restaurants or shop at their stores. And there are certain structures within the PPP that just don't comport with the practical realities of how our businesses operate. And we are well aware of that. We've had great messengers in the form of John and many other chamber leaders and other community leaders telling us some of the places where we ought to be looking at potential fixes. And so my hope is that that will get done in this next bill. And I anticipate that we will be able to ultimately make some gains in terms of fixing some of those flaws. And if you go online, again, you can get a better sense as to some of those specifics as to what we hope to accomplish. Finally, I'll just say, with respect to John's last question, which is a really thoughtful one, as to how I envision our economic recovery materializing over the coming days, weeks, months, and really years ahead. And the way I envision it materializing is the way that we've often recovered from crises and from challenges and from natural disasters in our state, in our community. I mean, Boulder and Colorado is no stranger to natural disasters, to fires, to the historic floods that ravaged our community just 7 years ago. And every time we've risen to the occasion, recognizing that we're all in it together. And as John was alluding to earlier, the fact that you have federal partners working with local city government partners, with community partners like the Chamber and other civic organizations, all trying to do their best to address the gaps. That is how we ultimately recover and bounce back from this incredibly challenging time. And I'm confident that we will. We've done it before. We will do it again, provided we remember that we're all in this together. So to that end, the best way that you all can help us as we seek to help address some of these challenges at the federal level is to reach out to us, to please take us up on the offer. Email our office with your stories, ways in which these programs are working and ways in which they're not. We get a fair deal of obviously, emails from folks telling us of the success stories, but we also get a lot of criticism, which is good too, because it helps us relay to our partners at the SBA and to my colleagues in Congress why the priorities that we're fighting for are so important and so crucial to our economic recovery. So again, you can go onto our website, neguse.house.gov. You can send me an email personally, and you can reach out to Jill as well. Again, thank you all for everything you're doing right now in our community to help us recover as a community. I hope you're staying safe, you're staying healthy, and you're staying hopeful. And with that, I will turn it back to you, John.
Joe, it is such a pleasure to talk to you today. And I'll just say, as I know many of us feel, it's such an honor to be represented by you. You are such a passionate, thoughtful, and just truly sincere person who represents our community so well. And so I can speak from personal experience that you've been very open to our input and, as you've demonstrated, responsive. And so I thank you so much for your leadership in Congress during what is a very difficult and challenging period. And thank you for being on Chamber Chat. I want to just remind everybody, our viewers, that on May 5, Tuesday, we will have our education sessions for all of you to figure out and make sure that you understand the regulations that you need to follow in order to get your business open and to make sure at the same time we're keeping our public safe. So May 5, Tuesday, make sure to check that out. Also go online if you have the resources and are able to support our Small Business Relief Fund. And as I always say at the conclusion of these chamber chats, absolutely critical, stay healthy. Joe said it. We want to make sure that our public and our community is healthy through this crisis. But at the same time, stay cool. We will get through this. And again, a theme that Joe mentioned, we're all in this together. So have a great weekend, and thank you for joining us on Chamber Chat.